Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. We will be continuing reading the book al-Ajouba al-Jaliya fi al-Ahkam al-Hanbaliya, or the clear answer to the Hanbali Rulings by Sheikh Musa bin Issa al-Qaddoomi rahimahullah. This is lesson number 17, removing Najasa. Let us begin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا بما ينفعنا وزدنا علما ويقينا وفهما وعملا يا رب العالمين. قال المؤلف رحمه الله. So we are continuing reading from the book, the clear answer, the Hanbali Rulings. We are reading as usual from the translation by Sheikh Khalid Shah. We are on page 51 of the book, section on removal of impurities. So the author, rahimahullah, nafallahu bihi wa bi ulumihi wa ulumi mashaykhana fi ad-daraini, ameen, faslan fi izalat al-najasati, the section on the removal of impurities. So quickly, just to explain what is najasa, the impurity is the thing that is impure, and we mean it is impure in its essence, as opposed to the thing that is tahir or pure. The thing that is impure in its essence cannot be purified, whereas the pure thing that becomes affected by the impure material, we would call this mutanajis. So this is the pure thing that has become impure and can be purified. So the author goes on, question 35, how does one purify something that has become filthy? And he replies, if the impurity is from a dog or a pig, or what was born from either of them or from one of them, it should be washed 7 times, and one of which is with dirt, and in parentheses, or soap. If the impurity is other than a dog or a pig, it is washed 7 times with water only. It is sufficient for the urine of a baby boy, less than 2, who has not eaten food, parentheses, breastfed only, to drench it by sprinkling water from the hand. And the ground is purified, and that which is similar to it, parentheses, other surfaces, are purified by the removal of actual impurity with water. So this is quite a dense answer. We'll try to go over a few things in more detail here. So the general ruling is that things that are mutanajis, pure things that have become impure due to some contamination, need to be washed 7 times. There were some different opinions narrated in the madhab, but please know that there's, as far as the mu'tamid, no difference of opinion on this. Regarding washing the impurity of the dog and the pig 7 times, which includes 1 time with soil, the evidence for the dog is coming from the hadith, and the pig is based on qiyas, or a analogy by the jurists. Now, instead of washing 1 time with soil, one may also use soap. This is mentioned in Dalil al-Talib, and in its explanation al-Nail, At-Taghlibi says anything that is strong in removing that substance. So soap, or anything like soap that is good at removing things can be used if one cannot or does not want to use dirt. Now the author doesn't address this issue, but we can refer to Dalil al-Talib to answer the question, how do we know if the impurity has been removed? So if you remember in our lesson about the types of water and when water becomes impure or contaminated, we talked about these three characteristics: the taste, the color, and the smell. And likewise, we will use these same three characteristics to determine if a impurity has been removed. Now what it says in nail, and I'm just kind of summarizing or paraphrasing here, is that basically the taste characteristic of the najasa, we mentioned the three, but the taste in particular is the one which is evidence of the ayn, or the source or the essence of that impurity remaining. So when you're removing the impurity, anything that would still have the taste there, it has to be removed. Now, as far as the color and the smell, if one tries his hardest to remove them and is still unable, those two are excused, either one by itself or both of them together. But anything that's remaining of the taste of the najasa has to be removed. So regarding removing the impurity of the urine of the boy who's not eaten food, there are a lot of things to discuss further here. First, the author is mentioning urine. So At-Taghlibi mentions in An-Nail that this excludes feces, but Al-Buhuti mentions in Sharh al-Muntaha that it does include things that are like it, and he mentions vomit. Also, they specifically mention a boy. So Ibn Muflih mentions in Al-Mubdah, Sharh al-Muqni', that this excludes the hermaphrodite and the female. Now the translator has put in parentheses a boy less than 2, and I am not sure about that. That is in parentheses, that is not in the text. I don't remember studying that in the books that I've read. I don't recall this point. If any of the brothers or sisters listening, if you know, please put in the comments, but I don't recall that the age of 2 is one of the conditions, but rather the fact that the child has not eaten food. And regarding not eating food, Shaykhuna Dr. Mustafa Ulyan, hafidhahullah, he mentioned that this means that the child, the boy, has no desire to eat food, nor can he eat food. And Al-Buhuti mentions in Sharh al-Muntaha that this excludes, for example, the sunnah of when there's a newborn baby to put a small piece of chewed up date in his mouth. This does not count as eating food. And this urine of this baby boy will be purified by sprinkling the water on top of whatever you're purifying. And it is not obligatory that you squeeze it out or remove that water. The actual sprinkling of the water is what is doing the purification. So when we talk about removing an impurity from the ground, it can be like inside the house or outside. And the way that we purify is for all types of impurities. So even these, what we might call like a heavier impurity, such as the dog and the pig, which require a special washing with soil, or any other type of impurity, one just pours water until at least the color and the smell go away. And I'm just summarizing this from what's mentioned in the nail. And Taghlibi mentions it's also can be purified. I mean, it doesn't have to be like an intentional pouring, but it can be purified by the rain or by flood water. And most of the other more advanced fiqh books, they just mention this point that other ways of what people might conceive as, cleaning or purifying the ground, such as with the sun, with wind, by letting it dry, these do not accomplish the task. It has to be pouring the water until the color and the smell go away. Now, Anil mentions one other important point here. What if the Najasa disappears? Meaning you're not sure where you don't see it anymore. You remember it being in a certain place, but you don't see any trace of it. One will still wash that until there's a certainty that it's gone away. So at least washing it the 7 times. Now, if one is certain that there's najasa on a certain item, but uncertain where it is. So, for example, your shirt, you're sure there's najasa on it, but you forget where it is. You don't know where to wash. Then you should wash the whole thing. Or in a case where there's some certainty, like it's on a sleeve, but you're not sure was it the right sleeve or the left sleeve, you can wash both sleeves. Now the author goes on, question 36. What is tahir and what is najis from animals? And he replies, animals and birds bigger in size than a cat and whose flesh cannot be eaten are najis. What is smaller, such as a mouse, is tahir. Every carrion or carcass is impure except for A. A human being, B. Fish, C. Locusts, D. That which does not have flowing blood like a scorpion. So when we talk about the pure animals, there's 2 criteria we look at. Its size, so is it larger than a cat or a cat and smaller? And is it something that we eat? So some of these things are maybe quite obvious to us, but other things need explanation. So in the nail, Taghlibi mentions some of the animals that are not eaten from among the large animals. So he mentions, for example, elephant, mule, donkey, and the predatory animals such as lions, tigers, wolves, leopards, dogs, jackals, bears, and monkeys. So these are all things that are bigger than a cat and that are not eaten. Now things that are a cat size or smaller are tahir. So this includes things such as mongoose, weasel, hedgehog, and I think you can imagine many other animals. This is just what's mentioned in Anil. One thing that's interesting is that Sheikh Mar'i al-Karmi, he does mention in Dalil al-Talib that as far as the things that are smaller than a cat that are pure, it includes the snake. But Taghlibi, he does give this comment that he didn't see that mentioned elsewhere, meaning that he's only seen in Dalil al-Talib by Sheikh Mar'i al-Karmi, that from among the Hanabila, that this was mentioned. Now the author goes on, number 37. What is the ruling of that which exits from an Islamically edible animal? And he replies, the urine and feces of Islamically edible animals and everything that exits from is tahir except for blood and pus. However, a small amount of it, meaning the blood and pus of it, is excused in salah or prayer. Then 38. What is the ruling for that which exits from an Islamically non-edible animal? And he replies, everything that exits from it is najis or impure except for human semen and milk. In salat or prayer, a small amount of blood and pus, meaning from a non-edible animal, and humans, but not pigs, if the animal is tahir when alive, are excused. So regarding the Islamically edible animals, the halal animals that are halal in their essence, we're not talking about the slaughter, but in their essence halal, unlike a pig, for example. The urine, the feces, and everything that exits from them is tahir except for their blood and pus. Shaykhana Dr. Mustafa, he did mention a point on this, that, or an exception on this, that the blood of a fish is tahir and can be eaten. Also regarding fish, or what, I don't know if we would technically call it fish, but some may call it a fish, is a shark, and a shark is not considered halal. Also on the issue of the pure and impure creatures, Shaykhuna Dr. Mustafa, Hafidhahullah, he mentioned that the worm and insect without blood is pure only if it's born in pure substances. So some of these creatures, like a cockroach, they are generally born in impure substances, but other worms and insects, it may depend on them. I mean, you have to look at each case individually. So now regarding the last point, about what exits from an Islamically non-edible animal. So when we talk about the things that exit from the animal, we are only differentiating here between what we eat its meat and what we don't. So for those things that we don't eat, everything that exits from them is impure except the human semen and milk. So this might be a little confusing, because if you think about something like a mouse, a mouse, according to the previous criteria we talked about, it's something that's smaller than a cat, so it's pure, but we don't eat it. So what exits out of it, such as its urine or feces, is impure. So in case you live in a house and you have mice, you don't need to be that worried if you think like that the mice are climbing up on your tables or whatever. But if they do, for example, you find the mice feces, you have to clean that. That's not considered a pure thing. So now, while we said small amounts of blood and pus from Islamically edible things are excused in prayer, but for what's not Islamically edible, if it is tahir, pure when it's alive, then a small amount of its blood and pus, meaning the small amount from the animal that's not eaten but is pure when alive, is excused in the prayer. Now we'll comment on a few other things before we conclude. These are not mentioned by al-Qaddoomi, but these are mentioned in many of the other books. So any liquid intoxicant is considered impure. This includes alcohol and whatever is like it, so beer, wine, hard alcohols, etc. These liquid intoxicants are all impure. A quick note on alcohol. There is some difference of opinion on alcohol, but I've heard many contemporary scholars, including some of our Hanbali scholars and non-Hanbali scholars, differentiate between the type of alcohol that's made by industrial process for a non-intoxicant use, such as hand wash. They've differentiated that from alcohol that is prepared with the intention to be an intoxicant. And I think, many people are familiar with this, but even with that opinion, many of the scholars say, it's best still to try to avoid it. So some things it might be hard to avoid, but the issue of the perfume and cologne, it always comes up. And I mean, according to what we've mentioned, most scholars allow us to use those type of modern perfumes and colognes that are mixed with alcohol, but they prefer that you just get the oil itself and use the one without the alcohol, which is definitely the safer thing to do. Now, intoxicants that are not liquid, they are pure. That doesn't mean they're halal to use, but as a substance itself, it's pure. And one thing that's interesting is that if you look at a nail, al-Taghlibi says, such as nutmeg, jawzat al-taib. And what's interesting is that, we see this is commonly eaten, and there is some kind of difference of opinion. Is this something that's totally prohibited, or if it's in a smaller concentration, is it allowable? And I do recall hearing that, I forget if it was in all of al-Arabiya or maybe specifically in like Mecca and Medina, but there was some rule that these spice mixes could only be maximum 25% nutmeg, in case people were going to use it for a wrong purpose, as an intoxicant. But the point is, liquid intoxicants are najis, impure. Non-liquid ones are pure. And we said pure doesn't mean halal, it just means it's not an impurity. The exception is hashish. So hashish, whether it is in a hard or it becomes liquefied, either way it's najis. So we'll stop here today. Inshallah, we have one more lesson from the book of Tahara, that's on the Hayd and Nifas, or the menstruation and postpartum bleeding. And after the next lesson, inshallah ta'ala, we will be completing the book of Tahara and be going on to the book of Salah, or prayer. So as always, please don't forget us in your dua, and that of all of our Muslim brothers and sisters, especially those that are in places of fitna. Let's not forget them. Let's not forget our scholars, those alive and those dead, who are guiding us through the confusing times that we live in. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een.